That gives a total gross salary cost to the employer of £2,805. And for 2019-20, that's the maximum amount that any employer is going to be able to claim in respect of any employee for a month. And that will change very slightly from 6th of April when the NIC limits change. So that's Dave. We then take a look at Sarah. So Sarah is a 0-hour contract worker. She's been working in a pub, but the pub closed on 1st of March and she's been laid off since that date. Provided her employer intends to carry on trading afterwards and to bring her back on the payroll, then they can bring her back now from the 1st of March and pay her wages and then make a claim under the job retention scheme. Now, Sarah doesn't pay any pension contributions, and because she's on a 0-hour contract, you look instead at what she would have been paid in March 2019. So if you're looking at what she would have been paid for March 20, being laid off, you look back to March 19. So what did she get in the equivalent period 12 months ago? You then compare that with the average amount of pay that she received for the full 12 months to the end of February, and you compare the two and you base your 80% calculation on the higher of the two. So based on a comparison, she's now her normal gross pay would have been 1,667, and you take 80% of that to work out her new gross pay. In the same way as we did with Dave, take off personal allowance, work out the tax payable, your employee's NIC. Sorry, I've got a pension deduction there, and she's not actually paying pension. But you'll get the idea, and her pay will be reduced by about 15%. So the impact on Sarah isn't as great as it was on Dave. The employer's got a new gross pay amount of 1,333. Add on the employer's NIC on that new lower gross. And again, sorry, I've got a pension contribution there as well, which we'll ignore. But the grant is going to be broadly £1,400. So that's Dave and Sarah. The calculations are going to become complex, and it might be that if you already deal with your own payroll, that you might look to outsource that to somebody who can help. And I know Michael and his team would be more than happy to help you. Now, whilst an employee is on furlough, they do continue to accrue employment rights. Now, one of the main points is that in a lot of cases, you're now going to be paying less than the national minimum wage or the national living wage. But when employees are on furlough, they're not regarded as working. So any payments being made are not for work carried out. So the limits don't apply. If the employee is already on statutory sick pay, as mentioned earlier, you can't place them on furlough whilst they're on sick pay. You'll have to wait for them to return before placing them on furlough. If you've got somebody out on maternity leave, then their basic entitlement remains. But if the employer is choosing to top up their maternity pay, then you can claim the top-up amount under the job retention scheme. And the same applies for any contractual adoption or paternity leave or shared parental pay. One thing that we're waiting for clarity on at the moment is it's our understanding that you can't make any payments for holiday because that will break the furlough period. So we're getting a lot of questions from clients where staff may not have taken their entire holiday entitlement in the year and what to do with that surplus holiday. Now, there is provision that was announced towards the end of last week where your statutory holiday entitlement could be spread over the next 2 years. So it will spread out the impact on employers. But that's something that I do think that we all need more guidance on. Employees can't carry on any work whilst on furlough, so that's providing any services to the employer or generating any income sources for them. The government guidance does confirm that the employee can carry out volunteer work or work for the community whilst they're off. Whether or not they can actually undertake other paid work will depend on the employment contract with the employer, because don't forget, they do remain your employee throughout this period. It's also understood that they will probably continue to accrue holiday entitlement whilst they're off. So again, this will cause an impact on the business going forwards, because not only do you have employees sitting at home not working for you, but they'll be accruing holiday entitlement whilst doing so. When the business is back up and running and your employees will return to your workforce, you're then going to be faced with the problem of accrued holiday entitlement, which you're going to have to honour. That's going to have not only an impact on the business when you need them most, but also there's going to be an impact on the employees who remained, probably worked a lot harder, picking up their furloughed colleagues' workloads, and also won't be accruing additional holiday rights for having done so. So that I think that is going to cause problems going forwards. The furloughed staff also continue to accrue other benefits and continuous service rights. So if at the end of this, the choice is actually that you are going to have to make redundancies, then you are potentially extending the period over which the continual service calculation will have to be worked out on. So the benefits of the scheme are undoubtedly, this is a generous package, not only for employers, but also for employees. It does cover some businesses' largest overhead and gives the businesses some breathing space to just park up the employees, have their costs covered, so that they can decide what the business is going to do in the longer term. I think it's really important as well, because it does take the pressure off employees in the shorter term of relieving them of that uncertainty as to whether or not they're going to be made redundant. And certainly whilst the scheme is running, I would envisage most employers to try and continue paying them as long as they possibly can. It's also a time to take up new hobbies. We're told by the medical director, get fit. Just looking out of the window, there are a lot of people that have suddenly taken up jogging. And also the gardens are looking absolutely fantastic around here at the moment. Downsides, there will be a short-term funding gap for businesses as they're paying employees who have been furloughed before the scheme is open to make the grant claim. I think there's a real danger that it could split teams up, so those that have been furloughed and those that are remaining and picking up a heavier workload, it may become an us and them culture. So employers are going to have to work very hard to keep engaged with the teams that they're furloughing. There's going to be more pressure on employees who are remaining, picking up a heavier workload. And as I said before, the furloughed employees will continue to have holiday accruing. That's going to build up a pressure for the businesses. And it might actually just be delaying the inevitable of making that redundancy decision, but also increasing your cost of redundancy given the continuous service remains throughout. There's also going to be an impact on mental well-being. It sounds nice just sitting at home for 3 weeks not doing anything, but actually the mental pressure on the employees cannot be understated. And there's a lot of guidance coming out from the government in how you might safeguard your employees whilst they're off. Now, personal service companies is one that we've had a lot of questions about. Now, our initial view on this was that a personal service company is typically one director, one shareholder. As a director, you have your fiduciary duties in looking after your business, and it's very difficult to actually park those up and not carry those out at all so that you would qualify under the furloughing. However, the government have confirmed that provided you're only undertaking your statutory duties as a director, so dealing with things like filing your accounts, your tax return obligations and keeping minutes and such like, that won't constitute working for the purposes of the furloughing. So if you're then not doing any work that is generating income from your business, so that would include pursuing new contracts, so you wouldn't be able to do that, the directors will be able to place themselves on furlough. However, many personal service companies pay a tax efficient remuneration, which means that they're taking a very low salary up to the NI limits and then making the balance up in dividends. Now, the government are absolutely clear on this, that the dividend amount will not count towards your salary amount for the 80% calculation. So this is actually, in reality, going to be worth very little to the majority of personal service companies, and it works out at about £550 per month. Now, what are directors? Are they full-time workers, part-time workers, or are they on a variable hour contract? Now, again, in reality, most directors are not going to have a service contract with their company. So it's very difficult to gauge whether you're looking at their salary payment at February 2020 or what their average was over the last 12 months. We are hoping for more guidance on this, but I think a common sense point of view might be to spread your usual salary. So if this is a normal package of taking the NI limit salary plus dividends, then that is what I would recommend you base your calculation on. I certainly wouldn't be looking at advising anybody to pay a significant salary now with the hope of then claiming that under the scheme rules. I think that's very much against the spirit of what's intended over all of this. What we also don't know is personal service companies are a great area of attack at the moment, with the revenue challenging them all and saying, actually, you're all employees. We don't believe that you are self-employed, taking a lot of cases to the tribunals. They are typically losing these cases, although I wonder if Eamon Holmes will be speaking with his accountant and seeing if he can make a claim under the scheme. At the moment, we've only got off payrolling for the public sector. So that's where the public sector will be putting personal service company directors through their own payroll. And again, we're waiting for clarification on that. So looking at other aspects then, don't forget you've got employees who will be carrying out work at home. And the Revenue have issued some really helpful guidance here on what tax liabilities might arise where you're using employees working from home, looking at the costs that you can reimburse them for, things like your broadband costs. Working from home, you can pay up to £4 a week without there being any tax charge on the employee. That will increase to £6 from the 6th of April. And there's all other information there, such as the provision of furniture to provide them with a working environment. So we'll be sharing the slides afterwards, and there's the link there for you to go to get more information on that. Do remember to look after the staff that remain working for you. We had an interesting scenario come up whereby the furloughed staff, it was very much a seasonal business. But if you look back over the last 12 months, then because of how the calculation worked, the furlough staff were going to end up being on considerably more, even at 80%, than the staff that were left working who are on reduced hours because the work simply isn't there. So you do need to look at the disparity of this and the conflict that it could cause throughout your workforce when you're considering what to pay. Some furloughed staff will have vans and cars available to them for private use. Just because they are parked up on their drive, we're being told not to go out and drive around unnecessarily, doesn't mean that the benefit in kind will stop for them. The way around that will be to return the vehicle back to the employer workplace, hand in your keys, and then get that in writing that the vehicle is no longer being made available to you. And you have to have that unavailable for at least 30 days for the benefit to drop back out again. So one there to think about. There is no doubt that the incidence of PAYE audits will increase from the revenue after all of this is over. Already they're talking about schemes that are being set up and backdated to the end of February, new employees mysteriously appearing on that February payroll run, and also salaries and wage payments being increased in that February payroll. The revenue are going to look very carefully at this, particularly where there was no registered scheme at February 2020, and a registration takes place shortly afterwards and supposedly is backdated. If you need payroll support, I see we've got an extra P in there, please do contact us. Michael and his team would be absolutely delighted to help you through this whole process. From a payroll support perspective, all of this couldn't come at a worse time because many of you will be closing down and going through your year-end processes as well. So actually this will place a lot of pressure on payroll teams. Please do as well seek legal and HR support because you are changing employment contracts. And then I'll hand back over to Alistair with any questions and answers. I can see that there have been a few. We did lose the email trail earlier when the webinar cut out, but if anybody's got any additional questions, then we'll be keeping the chat room open and we'll try to reply to as many as possible.
Thank you.
So, Alistair,
thank you, Tracey. I am mindful that we're coming up to half an hour. I'm hoping it's not going to cut out again, but just in case, we'll come through some of these. Rob's got a lot of questions, and I appreciate, Rob, you've been in contact with me as well earlier or last night, so I am coming back to you around business owners and what they should be doing to protect their income and make sure they've got cash in the business to pay staff that are being furloughed. My understanding of this is that obviously any business owner should be speaking to people that they pay money to, so that would be landlords. If they've got vehicles on contract hire, they need to be speaking to those businesses to try and reduce their overheads as well. Yeah, I can see you livid, Rob. There's a lot to be worked out here, and we're dealing with and speaking to the BCC, the British Chamber of Commerce, who have got a line into Westminster as well. Tracey, is there any specific advice that you'd give to somebody in Rob's situation as a director of a business who's furloughing staff and is going to have a hit on their income?
Yeah, it is looking at the alternative funding arrangements. There's grant income if you've got a business premises with a rateable value of less than 51, and I absolutely get it, Rob. It is really tough for those of us who are the employers over all this, and it's easy to think that employees are going to get it quite easy with the furlough scheme and are being paid for sitting around doing nothing when you're working absolutely every hour God sends to keep your business going, so you can bring your employees back into the workplace. yeah, what can I say? It is really, really hard for business owners out there. We are not all wealthy, and whatever the view is on accountants are not wealthy. We work as hard as everybody else. Everybody is really going to suffer through this crisis.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Tracey. Rob, I'll come back to you as well. There was a question around extra work as well, in terms of whether somebody who's furloughed can take on another job, or if they have more than one job. My understanding is that if you're furloughed from one business, you can't do activity that's going to economically benefit that business that you've been furloughed from, but
Yeah.
that won't necessarily stop you taking or carrying on with another job. I don't know whether you could pick up another job once you've been furloughed. Any thoughts
Yeah,
on that,
that will
Tracey?
that will be all down to the employment contract, Alistair. And actually, somebody could have 3 or 4 part-time jobs and end up being furloughed from all 3 or 4. So you can be furloughed by more than one employer. Some contracts will prevent you working for competitors, for example. That's not to say that an employer might not object to you going to work for Tesco's or doing some delivery service or something. So I think we've all got to work together on this. But again, going back to Rob's frustration, it's going to be tough for the employer. There's no way around that.
Yeah. Okay. There are some questions coming in around whether the manual change should be made to the employee. So if we furlough the employee in our payroll package, do we manually change the salary over for the employee?
Can you unmute Michael on that one, Alistair?
Yeah, of course. Bear with me, Michael. Let me just find you. There you go, Michael.
Hello, hi, can everyone hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hello, hi. I have just responded, putting a few words in the chat column, but basically there's no guidance on how it should be processed through the payroll, whether you split it out or whether you simply just put through the 80% amount. From an RTI perspective, it will accept both ways. From a clarity perspective for the employees, you might wish to show it, reflect it on their payslip so they can see it. If I'm honest, that's what we're doing for our particular clients, not only to assist and help the employees, but also thinking ahead to when we actually do the job retention applications. If we run reports over people's payslips, we can see what was 80%, what was 20%, and draw the figures accordingly.
Okay, thank you, Michael. That's good clarification.
Okay.
I think we've covered most of the areas in that chat. I would encourage anybody, as a business, to have a good look at the, what your outgoings are. We are finding a lot of businesses are speaking to their landlords or people that they would regularly pay, and are getting payment holidays or deferring those payments to help them through this period. Most sane landlords and or businesses that provide a service would rather that you were there in 3 months' time as a business, so they continue to take money from you for a service, than that you went belly up. So I would encourage you to speak to any businesses that you pay regularly.
Yeah, and Alistair, a lot of landlords as well are getting repayment holidays from their lenders, so they can pass
and they
that
should
on.
be able to pass that benefit on to you as well. So please do take the time, draw up a list of all the people that you pay regularly, make contact with them, have those conversations. That will reduce your outgoings and hopefully alleviate some of the short-term cash flow issues that as a business you are going to have. Unfortunately, I don't think there's a painless way around it, but the more conversations you can have with those kind of guys at the moment, the better.
Can I just pick up Michelle's question there, Alistair? She's asked a really good one on, can we delay the payment of tax and NI?
Yeah.
Absolutely, you can, Michelle. So you can arrange for a time to pay agreement with the revenue, and they're being very receptive to those at the moment. So whilst the wages going to your furloughed staff are going to create a PAYE and NIC liability, You can then defer that simply by ringing up the revenue before the due date and asking them to put that on hold. So again, another cash flow saving measure that you can implement.
Great, excellent. I would like to point out that there's a lot of questions that are coming around this, which are around the HR side. Obviously, we as a chamber are trying to support businesses across the whole region, as well as our members in this kind of crisis period. So we've got another free webinar which is going on. That'll be tomorrow at 10:30, and that is around the HR advice for furloughed workers, and that's with Clark Wilmot. So if you want to jump onto that one, that is proving very popular. So I'd probably jump on sooner rather than later on that one, please, if you can. I'm gonna switch on everybody's microphones so that if anybody has any questions, rather than posting in the chat, feel free to. I don't know if anybody had any kind of other specific questions at all here. No.
I've got Rob's one that he's just posted. Again,
Yep.
He's asked, can he delay the NI payment? Yes, same with Michelle's query. Just ring up the revenue and ask for a time to pay agreement. And the government website has the number to telephone on this.
Great, that's good advice. Excellent. Well, I'd like to say a massive thank you to Tracey and to all the team at Albert Goodman. I know that the webinars that Richard Bugler has been doing as well have been very popular and extremely useful. So I would urge you all to jump onto that one. If you've got any questions, obviously feel free to contact Tracey and the team at Albert Goodman on this. But otherwise, I'd just like to say thank you again to all of you for coming along. Apologies for the dropout midway through. I hope it didn't disrupt too many of you. We've got a couple of parts of this webinar as recordings that we will try and stick together with some sellotape so that we can post them somewhere else and be of use to others. So thank you very much, and all the best. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.